Hello and welcome. I'm Amritanshu Rai and you're watching Law of the Land on Rajya Sabha TV. Today we bring to you the issue of electoral reforms, and all that is in the domain of proposals. Electoral reforms have been debated for a long time now, but the government appears serious this time. To discuss the issue, I have with me Mr. K.J. Rao, former advisor to the Election Commission, and Dinesh Dwivedi, senior advocate of the Supreme Court. Now for the headlines. The Election Commission proposes disqualification of candidates seeking to contest elections if they have warrants issued against them or trial of a serious offences pending against them. Election Commission proposes state funding of elections, only registered parties to get state funding, independent candidates not to be included. The existing legal framework has not been able to prevent candidates with criminal antecedents from participating, nor has it been able to contain the role of money power. Disqualify persons from contesting elections even if warrants have been issued against them. This is what the Election Commission proposes. The existing legal framework has not been successful in preventing persons with criminal antecedents from contesting elections, so the Election Commission has made stringent proposals. It's been a long pending demand, but the government appears serious about electoral reforms this time.
Despite serious charges of crime like murder and rape against candidates, the system has not been able to prevent them from contesting elections. According to the Election Commission, over 17% of 4,000 legislators at state level have criminal records. But the delay in court procedure leading to their conviction has been preventing the Election Commission from disqualifying them. It is because of this the Election Commission has been in favor of reforming the election laws.
Especially for those cases where the charges are of a heinous nature, where at least you have murder cases, you have cases of dacoity, of theft, of kidnapping, or mass embezzlement, financial embezzlement. I think at that time all these candidates should not be allowed to contest. Let them come clean.
According to the existing laws, any person who is convicted of an offence and sentenced to an imprisonment of 2 years or more will be disqualified from contesting elections. The law governing the elections, the Representation of People's Act 1951, provides for the disqualification of persons convicted of specified offences. But these provisions have not been effective in achieving the desired results. The Election Commission now proposes to disqualify any person who is accused of a serious offence or has a warrant issued against him or even has a trial pending against him from contesting elections.
We are demanding is implementation of this measure of disqualification, basically. Secondly, the distinction between the existing members and the new members with regard to criminalization. I mean, if they are convicted. So, new member is at the threshold stage disqualified, but the old member, by merely filing an appeal, gets a reprieve and continues as member.
According to the proposal, a person will be disqualified from contesting elections if he is accused of a serious criminal charges, where the court is a prima facie satisfied about his involvement in the case. It is also suggested that persons found guilty by a commission of inquiry should also stand disqualified from contesting elections. We all know criminalization of politics is the greatest threat to parliamentary democracy. Even political parties agree the fact that charge-sheeted candidates should be eliminated from contesting elections. When it comes to practicality, there is a need for systematic changes in electoral reforms. Raj Kamal for Rajya Sabha TV.
Assuming that the proposals go through, it is likely to come into conflict with the constitutional scheme of things. Mr. K.J. Rao, what are the constitutional issues that come into play the moment you disqualify, let's say, or put qualifications like 5 years or serious offences, 5 years and above imprisonment, even if a charge sheet is filed, the candidate can be disqualified. First. Second, warrants issues or trials are pending. If these qualifications are to be put in place, how does it come into conflict with the existing constitutional scheme of things?
The constitution, there are no problems. Only the relevant act has to be amended. And the RP Act 1951 only has to be amended. And it is a very simple provision. Only the political parties should have the will to, they should have the will to amend the act and ensure that the criminals do not enter the houses. It is very unfortunate that the political parties or whatever party is there in the power, They have not amended the Act in spite of repeated reminders from the Election Commission of India. The first proposals were made in as early as in July 1998, and reminders have been sent, number of reminders 2004, 2006 again. And of course, the government is serious. It looks like that because they had number of consultations at various levels. There were nearly 8 consultations at various places all over India, and the national consultation was to take place sometime January 2011, something like that. But somehow or other, there was a change in the incumbency of the law minister, and that has been postponed indefinitely. It is very unfortunate. Otherwise, by this time, the act would have been amended, should have been amended rather, and everybody agreed. You can see the criminalization of politics is the main root cause of the corruption in India.
I'll bring in Senior Advocate
yes,
Dinesh Dwivedi. Mr. Dwivedi, the constitutional scheme of things, the conflict, because the way things exist in the Constitution, and especially the fact that other politicians may start taking advantage of a serious candidate and get things, cases filed to prevent him from contesting elections. That's another aspect. But casting your vote, contesting elections, the way it has been placed in the Constitution, does it come into conflict if you provide such qualifications?
No, I think Mr. Rao is right there, because there is no constitutional right to election. You contest an election, and that right is given only under the statute, that is Representation of People's Act. So we need not bother about the constitutional breach or violation on account of this change. The only thing to be seen is the amendment to the Act. And if the politicians are at one, which I doubt, then there shouldn't be any difficulty. But on the other hand, I recall that there was a parliamentary committee which has rejected this proposal.
So keeping all that point in mind, Mr. Rao, the question to you is that if it is easy to be done and can be done by simply amending the RP Act, then the government will is what has been lacking since the last decade or so. How do you propose that the government should get convinced, and what is it that the government wants to inbuilt into the system so that it is a much better
the parliamentary committee also, they were worried that some false cases may be foisted. But then the election commission itself said, see, whatever is 6 months prior to the elections, they can, whatever charges have been framed and where the court has framed the charges, only those cases can be taken prior to 6 months. Enough time. You see, before 6 months, then in that case, if the government really wants, they can have a special court for that. Special courts can be there. But they are not, they are not bothered to have any electoral reforms. That is the first and foremost thing. If they have the willpower, the political parties should come together, and the political reforms, this is the most important thing, because criminal power, criminal antecedents of the in the various houses of the various leaders in the houses, it should be barred totally. That is possible only when the Act is amended, and it should be done as fast as possible. Otherwise, Anna as type of agitation may come from people like Mr. Lingdo, myself, Mr. Krishnamurthy, Gopal. We are there. We are going to fight it out now.
That's a very valid point. Mr. Dwivedi, you're fighting a case in the Supreme Court. What is the perspective or the point of view of the courts till now? How have they been treating your application?
See, what happens is that since the legislative will is lacking, I wouldn't blame the government or lot other parties. The fact remains that political class as a whole has a very big stake in it. And I'll give you the reason why. See, in the coalition era, the winnability factor becomes very important.
That's right.
And the criminal element has two very important factors in their favor, advantages like money and the muscle power. So that advantage no party would like to leave. so long as this era of coalition continues, because each and every seat in government formation is important.
Yeah.
So every party is doing it. As you see in the latest election, every party is doing it.
On that note, yes, sir.
I was coming to the bill which we have filed.
Yes.
Therefore, when this parliamentary committee rejected on this ground that it is liable to be misused by the party in power, what they seem to overlook is that in democracy, we have to weigh the pros and cons. Every provision, whichever provision you have, supposing we don't change anything, even that is being abused. So the abuse of provision will always be there. But what we have to see is where are greater advantages and where, see, the abuse would be greater. So we have to balance the two. Now, if status quo is not giving us any result, in fact, we are deteriorating, then we must bring about some change. There must be some activism on the other side. Otherwise, what happens is that gradually, even the parliamentary committee which rejected this proposal, if you read the report, it accepts that this is the biggest danger to democracy.
It's time for us to head into a break. When we come back, we will talk about the impact of money power in elections. Welcome back. The permissible limit of expenditure for a Lok Sabha candidate is limited to 40 lakh rupees, but experience has shown that illegal spending goes up to as high as 5 crore rupees. The role of money power in influencing the voter has been creating a havoc with the democratic system, and that is why government is seriously considering state funding of elections.
The proposed electoral reforms include state funding of elections. Even party leaders of established national parties feel the pinch of constantly raising fund of elections year on year. If the consensus around the state funding of elections evolves, even the parties with modest financial background can hope to compete with established parties, as the state will allocate resources for all political parties' campaign expenditure.
It will be difficult because for the simple reason, state funding means generally you give it for the recognized political parties. What about the registered parties and the independents? Then there will be no level playing field in that case. Then what about those people may incur more expenditure also, or something will have to be done in that case. That will be the biggest problem which will have to be faced by the Election Commission.
The idea behind state funding of elections is to achieve equality on expenditure by all candidates so that money ceases to be consideration for contesting elections. State funding may also reduce overall poll expenditure and may bring in economic relief to contestants. According to the proposal, the Election Commission will spend money for all candidates contesting elections on registered party tickets. The funding may include the cost of publicity, election campaign, and expenditure on banners and posters. The proposed state funding will exclude independent candidates from the list. The candidates of all national parties and state parties having a party symbol may be eligible for state funding. This may lead to the limiting of expenditure of all candidates to the state-funded amount.
Amendment of the Act, regarding this expenditure, control on the political parties should be given to the Election Commission. The power for registration and deregistration of the political parties should be totally given to the Election Commission of India.
The Indrajit Gupta Committee on State Funding Elections in 1998 featured the idea of state funding elections. The committee said there is a full justification on constitutional, legal as well as on the ground of public interest. Raj Kamal, Rajya Sabha TV.
As a proposal, it appears fine, but when you think of it in terms of implementation, it appears challenging. Before we go into this point, Mr. Rao, I'll bring in Mr. Dwivedi on the point that he was making about safeguards.
Safeguards.
Yeah.
See, one of the safeguard is that you may not take cognizance for the purpose of disqualification of any perhaps FIR which has been registered 1 year before the election notification. Now that will substantially safeguard the abuse of power.
Okay.
Because elections are not there. So expressly for the purposes of disqualifying my rival, I would not register an FIR.
Right.
It is only, you see, within 6 months maybe or a year that before the elections that we start playing all these kinds of games. So we can have that kind of limitation. Perhaps
The other limitation or the right thing to do would be to have a fast track court.
Fast track court.
Those who come in with an offensive background or the criminal background, they must face the trial on a fast track basis.
Okay.
Now that would be a sufficient deterrence for the criminals to come in and become the members of the legislatures,
Because the
then
moment they come in, it will be fast tracked.
fast tracked.
Okay, so
So
that
they
would be a
won't like the
safeguard.
conviction.
Yeah, okay.
So this way you can have, the other important thing is, you see, the investigation, government can lodge an FIR,
Yeah.
the political party in power, get it investigated, but then it goes to the court for cognizance. There the court applies its mind. So for judicial application of mind is there before a cognizance is taken.
Yeah.
The moment cognizance is taken of an offense, then you get disqualification.
Yeah.
Thirdly, you may impose a limit. Say, an offense of more than 3 years punishment, 5 years punishment, whatever is thought to be fit.
That is
So
already
that's-
there.
So that minor offenses, you see, don't count.
Yeah, exactly.
But serious offenses count. So that's how you can safeguard.
I'll bring in Mr. KJ Rao on the state funding bit. You said it's not practical. But then how do you curtail the influence of money in
First
elections?
and foremost thing is, it is very unfortunate. You are seeing nowadays how much money is being impounded, and this is all because of the much depends on the selection of the candidates by the political parties. As Mr. Dwivedi has pointed out, it is the winnability which is being considered only. So they are giving tickets either to the criminals or the man with the money power.
Yeah.
Most of the tickets, you cannot expect a field level worker who is very good and who is a capable person to come and fight for an election. That is why able persons, good persons who were there as leaders earlier in the political parties, they are vanishing. What they used to say in the earlier during the campaigns, they would say they would provide the in social infrastructure. They will say they will build hospital. They will say they will construct school or something like that. Nowadays, they are saying that they will give the color TVs. What is this? I say?
I understand, Mr. Rao, but why, if not state funding, then
Listen,
how would you
state
do?
funding means you have to completely, no political party should be able to spend even a single pie. Is it practicable? First and foremost thing one. See, the political
What's
party
the alternative?
candidates,
I agree. What's the alternative according to you?
the first and foremost thing, the election should be, election commission should be given more powers regarding the regarding the rules to be made in connection with the control of the expenditure. First and foremost thing, because
Isn't it already there?
No, the expenditure now the limits are fixed by the government in consultation with the election commission. Only consultation. And the election commission has absolutely no power, because it is the election commission which knows how much money should be spent in an election. And that expenditure should be total expenditure to be spent either by the candidates or the political parties or their friends, relatives, whatever it may be. That is the most important thing. That control should be there with the election commission, but not with the government in power. With the party in power, government.
I get it.
That is must and foremost thing done. Another thing, what are you going to do about the independent candidates?
No funding, yes. Yeah.
Then will you give it to all the registered parties?
Yeah.
It can be given only to the recognized political parties
So-
on the basis of the seats won.
Essentially, the moment you bring in independent candidates and start giving state funding, there'll be
Finish.
everyone would
Not
like to
only
contest.
that, and then the control of the registration of the political party should be vested with the election commission, because election commission has only power to register a party, but it has no power to re-register. That is absolutely absurd, I say. The power which is with the commission to register a party, it can't re-register. What is this?
I get it. It's time for us to head into a break. When we come back, we will show you an interview with Jayaprakash Narayan, founder of Lok Satta Party. Welcome back. My colleague Raj Kamal spoke to electoral reform activist Jayaprakash Narayan and tried to understand the implications.
Why we need electoral reforms?
Raj Kamal, what is the constitutional principle behind a democracy? That we the people are sovereign. But because we cannot all assemble 120 crore Indians and make decisions every day in 1,000 matters, we choose our representatives. In other words, election is a mechanism by which we, the people, voluntarily transfer some of the power that we have over ourselves to our representatives. The sovereignty of the people is expressed in a democracy through elections. If the election is flawed, if Gangotri is corrupted at the source, then Ganga is completely polluted. So the election has led to a situation where money bags spend 5 crores, 10 crores in assembly constituency, and only money and expenditure of money, without that you cannot win. And if criminals come in, and if people come into government and they plunder the country, and if things don't work, and no matter how many people we elect, the people always end up losing, then we have a problem. But we still do recognize that there are some serious problems with the way we govern ourselves. And elections are at the root of it. If you don't change the nature of politics, you can't change the nature of bureaucracy, the nature of judiciary, nature of anything else. So this is at the heart of it.
Sir, particularly in electoral reforms, there are more than 700 politicians out of 4,092 politicians with existing charge sheet records.
Criminalization.
Yes. So what is your take on it? If you want to make it as an electoral reform, what are the changes you are expecting?
We must understand that criminalization is again a symptom. If there is cancer inside, there is pain or an ulcer outside. If you treat the ulcer or the pain, cancer is not going to disappear. When you and I say so-and-so is a criminal, the people are not seeing them as criminals, they are seeing them as heroes. Why? In a country where you can't get justice in a court of law in the normal course, people are seeing the criminal as an undeclared judge. A small thing, a big thing, somebody borrowed money, is not repaying, there is a small land dispute, there is no solution to that problem. 100 problems, this man is now settling by rough and ready justice, sometimes with brutal methods. He's become a popular hero there, achieved a certain cult status. If you don't address rule of law, if you don't create a mechanism by which people get justice for simple issues on a day-to-day basis easily and inexpensively, criminals always will flourish as judges.
Sir, we have mechanisms to identify candidates with flaws, identify candidates who are charge sheeted, who are involved with crimes. But still, they have scope to contest in elections and they are surviving in elections.
Because under the current law, only upon conviction for an offense, the conviction is for 2 years or more, or certain specific offenses, only then you are disqualified. Otherwise, a charge sheet does not disqualify you. Now, we can certainly bring in a law disqualifying people with charge sheets, but only in respect of some serious offenses. In 2003, a bill was introduced with 8 offenses: terrorism, abduction, kidnapping, and armed robbery and violence involving of that kind. Of course, things like murder. Not for other things, because there's a danger, once you use charge sheet as a mechanism, there's a danger that your political opponents will use it as a weapon.
Sir, Election Commission is an observer and is a caretaker of these election process from Vice President, President to normal elections. We have an independent election commission which primary duty is to deliver free and fair elections. Do they have enough powers to filter the candidates at the nomination filing level? When they submit the form 26, can't they check before the elections and finalize the candidates?
No, they don't have the powers, and they should not have the powers. I am categorical on this. No, these are all dangerous slopes. Initially, it looks nice. An election should never be decided by disqualification. That must be the first norm. All dictatorships, the way they subvert democracy is disqualification on some pretext or other. Look at any dictatorship. Before going for elections, they first disqualify some 2,600 people who are their primary enemies, politically speaking, on some pretext or other. Then all democracy loses legitimacy. If Election Commission decides who is the right kind of person to represent the people of this country, then there is no democracy left any longer.
And sir, the other reform we need is to reduce and to stop the illicit flow of money in elections. Parliament have given some powers to spend money, but from local MLA to the minister at the central level, spending crores of rupees. Why are we unable to stop this?
Why are politicians spending money like this? 2 reasons. We have to understand both these very carefully. The first is, in a first past the post system, there are no second prizes. You may get significant number of votes, but ultimately if you don't get a vote more, you will lose. 1 more vote means you win, 1 less vote means you lose. There is that panic and fear in parties and the candidates. They don't know how to get that 1 more vote. Somebody somewhere started or starts that process. You start paying to vulnerable people, the poor people, etc. Now it's become a habit. Everybody is paying now. But certainly, paying money is giving an entry. It's an entry ticket. And if you don't address that problem by a systemic solution, for instance, some kind of proportionality model, whereby the vote percentage is translated into seats, then people's attitude will change.
According to Mr. Narayan, attempting to bring in state funding of elections may not work. Bringing you in on the state funding, I mean, what is the way to go? I mean, if you leave it up to the political parties, they will never put their foot down. And if the state funding is not the way to go, then what do we do?
I think, as you rightly said, the answer partly would be in the political will. But I am for state funding because that will ensure the equality in the expenditure, as you said. But the issue is how to bring it about. Now, I am not an expert on that, so I don't know what should be the steps taken. Unless we have the full blueprint of it, we can't figure out. But then one thing is certain, that if you have state funding, then you must be really strict about that expenditure in the polls. And then you should not allow any expenditure which we saddle it on our friends and that should not be allowed.
That's right.
All that should be added on to the expenditure of the candidate.
You, Mr. Rao, if not political parties, we can't depend on them and they will never bring in the thing. Now, and state funding, you say no. So what is the middle path?
Middle part, if state funding is not there, then the act should be amended to restrict the expenditure, and the political parties' accounts are to be audited. That is there, but it should be, the power should be given again, the controlling power should be given to the Election Commission. Then only.
Come around.
Because auditing
so you are in favor of empowering the Election Commission
it has
more
to be, because
and taking it away from the government and giving it to the Election and making it implement the
because
seats.
you can see that it is the Election Commission which is ensuring the free and fair elections everywhere.
Yeah.
That is the name
That's
in
the
world,
nodal
entire
agency.
world.
Yes.
So that is the one of the best organizations now in India, where you don't find any type of scam or anything like that. Otherwise, you
yes,
have
Mr. Dwivedi.
What I was kind of suggesting is that we have been investing in the Election Commission a huge bit last 20 years, and it has come up very well. Now, what I would suggest is there is no harm in giving the Election Commission these extra powers. There's no harm because some authority has to be given the power. There has to be decentralization. Now, government having that power, you see, makes it a biased kind of thing, where the minister or the perhaps MPs of or the MLAs of party in power or the candidates of party in power are involved. Consequently, there's a bias. Let the Election Commission have the power, but then restrict it through legislation, make rules and regulations, and make it a proper forum.
On that note, sir, thank you, sir, for joining us on this discussion. It's time for us to end the show. You can email your suggestions and comments to law.rstv@gmail.com. You can also watch our shows on the YouTube. We'll be back with a new issue and a new episode. Keep watching Rajya Sabha TV.